Please.
Yeah. Mm. Good evening, everyone. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to our Honorable President, Professor Dhruv Mukhopadhyay, and other council members of the Structural Geology and Tectonic Studies Group India for gracing this online platform with their virtual presence. So, with the permission of the chair and as your host for today's evening, I would like to welcome Dr. Priyanka Singh Rao to deliver the monthly lecture of this month, organized under the aegis of SGT-SGI in association with Department of Geology, BHU. Welcome, Dr. Priyanka. Before I hand over the stage to Dr. Priyanka, I would like to provide a brief introduction about today's speaker, mainly uh, for our young students and other listeners across India who have joined us through our YouTube channel as well. Dr. Rao earned her BSc in 2011 and Masters in 2013 from Lucknow University. And subsequently, he qualified NET, GATE, and also UPSC examination for GSI. And so she joined the Geological Survey of India in 2015 and served as geologist till 2020, where she has handled several projects on gold, base metal, and rare earth mineralization. Dr. Rao also completed her PhD from Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology, Dehradun, under the guidance of Dr. Jan Gonda Perumal. During her PhD, Dr. Priyanka worked on the tectonic implications of great earthquakes and active fault mapping. Currently, she is an assistant professor in the Department of Geology, Central University of Tamil Nadu, Thiruvarur. She has also published around 8 research articles in journals of international and national repute and several papers in national symposiums and workshops. Her main research interests lie in tectonic geomorphology, sedimentology, and structural geology. And so now I would like to request Dr. Priyanka Singh Rao to present her talk on the topic Great Earthquakes and their geological structures along the eastern Himalayan frontal thrust. Welcome, Priyanka.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. A very good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the entire team of SGT SGI for giving me an opportunity to present my work in front of all. And before starting with my talk, I just want to confirm whether my screen is visible to all.
Yeah, it's visible, Priyanka. You can share
Uh,
your
can you
slides.
all able to see my slide or the
Yeah.
presentation? Okay, thank you, sir. So, as Sir has introduced today, I will be talking about these great earthquakes and their geological structures along the eastern Himalayan front. And before going into the topic, I just want to share that if we look at these different pictures on this slide, we see there is some monument, and the picture has been taken at different time, and the monument, it looks more or less similar. So it's a same monument, but what we see when we move from left to right, we see the monument was constructed sometime say around 1900, then it got damaged during 1934, then again it was reconstructed in 2012, again it got damaged in 2015, and then now it is the present scenario, the monument is still like this. So if we follow this sequence, then what we see is this sequence of construction, then destruction. It's a common trend in the Himalaya now. And since the topic that I have taken, it focus on the eastern Himalayan front, but the picture that I am showing is from this monument that is in the central Himalaya. It's in a Kathmandu. So the same things prevail in the northwestern Himalaya or in the northeastern Himalaya. That's a succession of the destruction and the constructions of the architectures. Now, as it's written here that the great earthquake. Before going into the talk, I just want to clarify the earthquake with a magnitude of 8 or more than 8 are considered as a great earthquake, and the earthquake that falls in a range of magnitude 7 to 7.9, they are the large earthquakes. So the Himalayans earthquake scientists, they are quite curious to know when the next earthquake will going to hit, where exactly it will going to hit, what magnitude is being expected, and the most important is how long the time period of such great earthquake would be. So when we talk about the time period, that means the recurrence interval, and these all questions that is generally in the mind of these earthquake scientists, or even in the mind of a common people. They are very crucial to evaluate the seismic hazards along the foothills of the Himalayan range. Now, here is a figure that shows when we see the x-axis, there is a time range, and these are the different disciplines that focus on the different deformational structures. So when we see the local seismic stations, or when we focus on the geodetic studies, these geodetic studies, they focus on the time scale in decades, whereas when we talk about the instrumental records, they focus up to say 100 or say 200 years. But when we talk about the deformations of say tens of thousands of years, then these instrumental studies or the geodetic studies, they do not fulfill the purpose. So these seismologists, they work on the data recorded by the instrument, but they do not interpret the geological evidences that are created during the earthquakes. So the paleoseismology is a field that focus on the instantaneous deformation of the landforms or the quaternary sediments during an earthquake, and the paleoseismologists, they only quantify these landforms that are produced during the large to great earthquakes. I will be focusing on large to great earthquake. I won't be focusing on these moderate earthquake. So today I will talk about the contribution of the geologist in understanding the seismic cycle in Himalayas, and these geological studies along with these, when we talk about these geodetic studies, they help in understanding the seismic potential and the associated hazards in the Himalaya and the adjoining region for up to say thousands or tens of thousands of years. So, in a nutshell, not only these, even we have some historical archives, historical records of these seismic events in the Himalaya. So these historical records, instrumental data, paleoseismic investigations, and these decadal geodetic studies, they are crucial in understanding and assessing the size of the earthquake, the rupture dynamic, and the seismic potential of an area. So, and one thing more I want to focus here is that recently the active fault study has developed as an important tool or important area of research in the seismic hazard assessment, where that actually involves the mapping of the tectonic geomorphic features, and it involves the paleoseismic investigation and geochronological dating. So all these are helpful in preparing the earthquake catalog and in the seismic hazard assessment. So here is a picture that shows the general architecture of the Himalaya, and this persists all the way from the northwestern Himalaya to the northeastern Himalaya. And what we see in this picture, that towards north is this topographic high of the higher Himalaya, and in front of this higher Himalaya towards the south there is a lesser Himalaya, and further towards the south of this lesser Himalaya we have the Shivalik hills or the sub-Himalayas. And the most important is when we talk about these paleoseismic investigation or the active fault study. So at the front of these sub-Himalayas, there are some small ranges, some budding ranges, or one can call them as a baby ranges, that corresponds to the landforms that are produced during the seismic events. So when I talk about these landforms that are formed during the seismic event, the most important of them are, say, deformed quaternary sediments or the fault scarps. So these tectonic landforms or the active fault scarps, they generally truncate at the mountain front, And the most important thing is they roughly coincides with the fault plane that has displaced the ground surface. And as I'm talking about the scarp, and as it's written here on this picture, scarp, in a general meaning, they are the steep truncation between the land surfaces, and they can be a fluvial scarp or the tectonic scarp. And when we talk about the fluvial scarp, they are formed by the fluvial processes that cuts into the earth surface, whereas the tectonic scarps, these are the scarps that are produced during any seismic event. And since they are produced during the seismic events, they are truncated at the mountain front, so they generally follow the trend of the mountain front. And second thing is they preserve the signature of the seismic events, whereas the fluvial scarps, they do not preserve. So all along the mountain front, these earthquake generally, when I say earthquake, means these great earthquakes, and they form the landforms that break through the ground surface or the quaternary sediment. Not going into much detail, but just speaking roughly about the evolution of the Himalaya, we all know that during the breakup of the Pangaea, the Indian subcontinent, it became isolated from the certain part of the Pangaea, which we all know is a Gondwana land. And this Indian subcontinent, it has started its northward journey at around say 120 to 130 million year ago, and it eventually collided with the Eurasian plate at around 40 to 50 million year ago. And subsequent to this collision, the convergence between the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate, it lead to the shortening and the upliftment of the northern margin of this Indian plate. And because of the emergence of the three major crustal thrusts, and these three major crustal thrusts, we all know that they are the main central thrust, main boundary thrust, and the main frontal thrust. Now, here this is a 3D perspective view of the seismotectonic model of the Himalaya, and this model demonstrates the underthrusting of the Indian plate beneath the Eurasian plate, and the convergence of this Indian plate, it has produced the shortening of the northern margin of the Indian plate through the imbrication of the Indian crust along these major intracrustal thrust. And the stacking of these crustal slabs through the accretion actually gave rise to the overall architecture of the Himalaya. So those geodetic measurements, a lot of information that we know about the architecture of the Himalaya is through these geodetic measurements. And these geodetic measurements, they indicate that all these crustal thrust, these crustal thrust, they have followed the forward propagation sequences, and from north to south as MCT, MBT, and HFT, they are named in order of their evolution. And all these thrusts, they soul into a common decoloma, which is shown here as red and pink, and this common decoloma is known as the main Himalayan thrust. So when we say these all thrusts, they soul into a main common decoloma, so the frontal thrust, the youngest of the three, the frontal, that is a Himalayan frontal thrust, and this Himalayan frontal thrust is also known as the main frontal thrust in the central Himalaya. This marks or it represents the surface expression of this MHT. Now this MHT has a very unique geometry. It has a ramp and a flat geometry, which we can see here in this figure number that is marked as a C, where it has an outer ramp that lies at a shallower depth, occupying a brittle regime, and it emerged at a surface making at an angle of say 30 degrees, whereas the second ramp, it's an inner ramp. It dips at around 15 degrees, and it lies in a mid-crustal depth beneath the front of the higher Himalaya. And this ramp geometry is very important for the nucleation of the earthquakes. So what exactly happens during an interseismic period? This outer segment, which is marked here in red, this outer segment for a width of 100 kilometers from the Himalayan front to the north is generally locked. And one thing I forgot to say, that here when this Himalaya, this Indian subcontinent was making its northward journey, and when it was converging, so initially it was actually moving towards north with a convergence rate of say 15 centimeter per year, and now this convergence rate is decreased to 38 to 40 millimeter per year, and 50% of this total convergence rate is consumed by the Himalaya, where rest is now distributed in the Tibetan zone. So when we talk about this interseismic period, and when we say that the outer 100-kilometer segment of this MHT is locked, this means that during interseismic period, this outer locked segment that falls in the brittle regime, it do not consume any of the convergence. It consumes negligible convergence, whereas the purple segment that is shown here is continuously slipping in the downward northern part towards the north, and this means that there is a continuous creep, and because of this continuous creep, the entire 20 millimeter per year of convergence is being consumed by this northern down dip segment of the MHT. And because of this locking zone and the continuously creeping zone, they are established a interseismic coupling, and because of this interseismic coupling, there is accumulation of elastic strain in a zone that lies between this locked segment and between this between this locked segment and a continuously creeping zone. And this transition between the brittle and the ductile zone is a place where all the accumulation of the elastic strain is taking place due to ongoing northward convergence of the Indian plate. Now, the important thing is this transition zone, it coincides with, if we just see the just exactly above this transition zone where a lot of red color dots epicenters are located, just above this transition zone, it coincides with the front of the higher Himalaya, and this front, from here only, this higher Himalaya, it takes a steep gradient, and there is a steep rise of the higher Himalaya in front of this lesser Himalaya. Importantly, just like this surface feature, when we see in the subsurface, this zone also coincides with the zone of microseismicity. So the microseismicity is concentrated over a width of say 30 kilometer for a belt from 10 to 20 kilometer deep, just beneath the higher Himalaya. So just beneath the higher Himalaya, there always the nucleation of these earthquake take place, and these nucleation of the earthquake take place because of the continuous accumulation of the strain, and this accumulated strain, they need to be released periodically. So these accumulated strain only triggers the earthquake which we feel, and whenever these earthquake take place, so this accumulated strain or this accumulated energy is released. And since this is also reflected here in this top figure where we can see the shortening bars, so this indicate there is an increase in the horizontal velocity field in the vicinity of this higher Himalaya. There is a sudden increase in the topography, and here only there is a increase in the horizontal velocity vector. So now again, coming here to this figure, what we see is, because of this interseismic coupling, there lies just a minute. So when we see this, because of this interseismic coupling, there is an accumulation of the strain, and this accumulated strain, they only trigger the earthquake. So earthquake, whenever they propagate towards the south, they unzip the entire lock segment, and they releases the stress in form of the seismic waves, wherein the great earthquake, they unzip the entire lock segment, they reaches the front of the mountain, and they disrupt the ground surface, they deform the landforms present there, or they deform the quaternary surfaces, whereas the large earthquake that have a magnitude of less than 8, they will either remain blind or they will be reaching the hinterland part as an out of sequence thrust. So this is,
Dr. Rao, I have one question on your
yes,
slide
yes, sir.
because I need to understand that. Would you go to your previous slide, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so my name is Shantanu,
Yes, sir.
Shantanu Misra. So on your figure C,
Hmm.
it shows, so the green line is ductile and brittle and red line is brittle, or
Yes.
this yellowish area is ductile and the gray area is brittle. I mean,
Sir, in this
what is
figure,
the point? Yeah.
sir, if we focus this figure, then here this entire red line is the brittle zone, the green one is a ductile, and there is a transition zone between the ductile and the brittle
Which is
zone.
orange, where you have this star mark.
So where we have this star represents the nucleation of the earthquake. So because all the strain, this elastic strain is getting accumulated in the brittle ductile zone, therefore these all earthquake, they nucleate around this brittle ductile transition zone, which is shown here in yellow.
But isn't it easier that the elastic strain rather accumulates in the brittle part than in the brittle ductile part? Because in brittle it is much easier to accumulate the elastic strain before it ruptures than in in brittle ductile. So that is my first question here. I mean, you may explain it later. And second question is, you are showing a cross section in C. We see the profile, but this red and green line, are they same across this? I mean, laterally they are the same, or they have a variation also along the horizontal direction?
Sir,
If so,
actually,
if so, then why we have earthquake at a single point? Why not all along the strike of this brittle ductile transition? That's the second question. And third question, if you just go back to, so we have 131 degrees marked there. Is that a deep, or is the latitude you are marking in that image? Not in this one, but you have the other one where you have the colorful diagram.
this one.
Yeah, so you have 31 degree marked here.
Where is 31 degree?
So you
Sir,
have last
this 31 degree is a latitude, sir. It's a
Okay,
latitude.
fair enough.
It's not
I
a
just
dip.
asked because I just wanted to know this. Otherwise, it is difficult to follow the next part. I did not understand that, but you may answer it later. No problem. Thank you.
So, sir, I just want to clarify the things here. See, overall, roughly, we say that the brittle zone, I am showing the cross section. This cross section is of the central Himalaya. But overall, when we talk about the locking zone, what I'm saying, interseismic coupling, this is overall roughly it is uniform, or it is homogeneous all along the Himalayan arc, starting from the northwest to northeast. But there lies the width of this log zone, it varies. Just generally we say it's approximately 100 kilometer, but when we go to this towards the east, even this locking width, it increases to up to 150 kilometer. And if we just go to the further southern extension of the Himalayas in the Mishmi ranges, then this width actually decreases to say 65 kilometer. But overall, if we see, then this architecture or this geometry remains the same. And another,
may I just ask you another question?
Yes, sir.
In case of the 1950 earthquake, we have the rupture zone.
Let her speak first. Questionnaires can be continued after.
Okay.
I think that is better.
Right, sir. We have a discussion session after.
Okay, thank you.
I think we can discuss everything later. It will be a good one. Thank you very much. Please continue, Priyanka.
Okay, so shall I continue with my talk?
Sure.
Okay, so as we see, this is exactly the thing that I have said in the previous slide. Here, I just want to say that there is a continuous convergence. I just want to emphasize that this 2018 millimeter per year arrow, do not think that Tibetan plateau is actually moving towards south. It is not. This arrow is representing the accumulation of the convergence in the Himalaya. So our Indian plate is subducting or it's with converging with a rate of say approximately 40 millimeter, and of this 40 millimeter, the 50% is being taken up by the Himalaya, rest is distributed in this Tibetan plateau. And every day we have this microseismicity, and when we focus on this microseismicity, these microseismicity do not play an important role in the release of this accumulated elastic strain. Whereas if we focus on this co-seismic large earthquake, then these co-seismic large earthquake, they do not propagate all the way or they do not unzip the entire lock zone to reach the front of the mountain. So either they will be remaining blind, or even if they reaches the surface, they will be reaching the hinterland part instead of the front. Whereas the great earthquake, they will be unlocking the entire lock zone, they will be rupturing the entire lock zone, they will be reaching the surface, where these great earthquake, they will be producing the post-seismic landforms, they will be dislocating or deforming the quaternary sediments or the landforms, forming these different landforms. So here is a map where this small inset, it shows this is and all along the Himalayan arc we have the evidences, or we have this large to great earthquake in past few centuries. So during past few centuries, this Himalaya has witnessed several say moderate to great earthquake, and here these different polygons, they represents the surface rupture that are inferred either from the historical documents or from say instrumental data, or from the paleoseismic data, or from the leveling data. And these yellow stars, they show the epicenters of the large to great earthquake, and these in past 500 years the Himalaya has witnessed these 5 large to great earthquakes, say 2005 Kashmir earthquake, 1905 Kangra, then very recent 2015 Gorkha earthquake, then 1934 Bihar Nepal earthquake, and then this is a 1950 Assam earthquake. And this is a seismotectonic map at the back, which shows the epicentral location of these moderate to large great earthquake in the eastern Himalaya. So this is a seismotectonic map of the eastern Himalaya, where we have these green color polygons that shows the surface ruptures of these different earthquake that eastern part of the Himalaya has witnessed in past few years. And of these, the important ones, they are the say 1713 or 1714 Bhutan earthquake. Then we have a 17th century earthquake. This was also a quite damaging earthquake that has damaged the entire town in and around the Sadia, with a lot of surface dislocations. Plus we have this with the great, till now the biggest instrumental earthquake, that's a 1950 earthquake. One thing that I want to show is that in this eastern Himalaya, there we also have evidence of, we also have this 1947 earthquake that took place 3 years before 1950 earthquake. But this 1947 earthquake did not contribute in anything in 1950 earthquake, just like the recent 2050 and 15 earthquake. It did not reach the surface, it remained blind, and it has actually loaded the adjoining areas with this strain, and giving the way to the future big earthquakes. So there was no contribution of this 1947 earthquake. And the most important thing that we see here, or we notice here, is that the deformation is confined between the MCT and the HFT, where accumulation is in the hinterland and release is generally in the foreland. So whenever this release take place, lot of these earthquake related post-seismic landforms, they come into picture. Therefore, we need to investigate these landforms to get an idea about the past earthquake. Why I'm using the term past earthquake or paleoseismology? Because the invention of the instrument since say this 19th century, say late 19th century or the mid 19th century, we have the record of those earthquake, but we do not have any record of the past earthquake. And to construct the or to estimate the or to get an idea about the recurrence interval in a particular part of the Himalaya along the Himalayan arc, it is very important to have the complete information about the past earthquakes. And even the historical documents, they only have something in writing. So they do not tell whether the earthquake have ruptured the surface. So for that, these paleoseismic investigations, they play an important role. And one more thing that I want to focus here is, if we talk about the entire Himalayan range, these large to great earthquake, they generally nucleate beneath the higher Himalayas, near this brittle ductile transition zones. And this brittle ductile transition zone, it lies to the south of the Indus-Sanko suture zone. Except when we talk about this 1950 earthquake, this 1950 earthquake, it nucleated further east of the Tiding suture zone in the Mishmi range, and this Tiding suture zone is equivalent of this Indus-Sanko suture zone. So this is the only, there lies a difference. Now, as I said, whenever these earthquake, they reaches to the foreland, they disrupt or they dislocate or they deform the land surfaces or the quaternary sediments. So there are the primary landforms and there are secondary. Primary means the landform that are created during the time of the seismic events, and for that these fault scarps or the fold related fault, they are very important. That's why we generally focus on the fault scarp, investigating these fault scarps. But when we talk about the secondary landforms, they are not on fault feature, rather they are off fault feature, and they are not they are produced due to the shaking after an event. So when we talk about the shaking after an event, they may be the on-fault related landslides or on-fault related liquefaction features or the sand blows, whereas these, when we talk about the liquefaction feature, it is not always that we find these liquefaction features near to the fault. And I am focusing on this point because since we are investigating these fault scarp, we try to open these fault scarp to find the stratigraphy or the structural setup within that fault scarp. So it is very important to know the dip of the fault or to know the displacement or the slip displacement during an earthquake. These information one do not get from these off-fault features. Off-fault feature will be telling only about the timing of an event, but how much slip took place during the event, that one cannot get from these off-fault feature until and unless these liquefaction feature or sand blows, they are near to or just adjacent to the fault plane. So this is a fault scarp. As this cartoon on top, it shows how these earthquake, they propagate towards the foreland, how these accretion of these the crustal slabs, they take place and they help in the rising or the growth of the mountain or the orogenic features, where then whenever these faults, they reaches the surface, this is how these fault scarps are formed, and that fault scarp, they roughly coincides with the fault plane along which the deformation took place. So when we talk about this, since my talk is focusing on the eastern part of the Himalaya, so I, along with my team, we have conducted studies in the further eastern part of the eastern Himalayas, in the vicinity of this eastern syntaxial belt, where in past 5 to 6 years, we have excavated trench at 3 locations. One is at this Hemibasti area that's shown in the green square, and the another is in this Pasighat area, and the third one is along the Mishmi range. For the very first time, my team has investigated this carried out this paleoseismic investigation along this Mishmi thrust in the Mishmi range. So now this is how these fault scarp are formed. So if we see the land surface prior to the earthquake, and when earthquake hit any area, there is always the rise in the surface. When I say that there is a steep truncation of the land surfaces. So this is something, the figure B which we are showing here, the figure B indicates something that we see in the field. But what exactly is within this scarp? For that, one have to open this scarp. So, and the concept is very clear. Just like for exploring any resources, we go and hunt for the pathfinder elements. Similarly, for exploring the evidences of the earthquake, we need to find the these deformed feature or these deformed landforms. So here the cartoon C shows when the walls of these scarps are open, there are only two surfaces that got deformed. So prior to earthquake, there was a deposition. There might be a deposition of the two surfaces. Both these two surfaces, as the gravel layer 1 and overlain by this red sandy or say some fine sediment unit 2, they got deformed, where the deformation is seen in form of this say thrusting and the folding, and formation of this hanging wall block and footwall block took place. Then because of these geomorphic processes, because of this erosion and the deposition, there is always the scraping of the element from the hanging wall block. Those scraped off material, they get deposited in form of a colluvial wedge, which is shown here as the yellow polygon marked by C1. So this presence of colluvial wedge in any trench is very important because they reflect the events, how many events are there in the trench. And when these colluvial wedges forming at the same time, again the deposition of the new will be taking place in the footwall or in the hanging wall as well. Then again, if the same area is hit by the second event, then the younger sediments along with the colluvial wedge of the first event and the previously deformed event, everything will be getting deformed, and then the second colluvial wedge, which is shown here in brown, will be forming. So this is a basic concept, and we open these trenches to see the stratigraphy, to see the structural element. But before going for the excavation, the important thing is to locate these different geomorphic features as well as the tectonogeomorphic features along the mountain front. For that, these satellite imageries, they help, and even say the Cartosat anaglyphs, or say the some other satellite data. For example, here this is an ortho perspective view of the Pylades image, where these ortho perspective the elevation data also shows the beautiful this truncation of the this landform. So after plotting these data in the lab, we go to the field, we confirm them, we carry out the microtopographic mapping or with an aid of the RTK GPS or total station survey. And after everything is confirmed, we again finalize these maps, and here we can see that these different digital elevation model, they are overlain by the contour map, where even the closeness of contours, they reflect the presence of these fault planes. Once these faults are confirmed, then these microtopographic surveys are done. Here is a microtopographic map, which again from this, the exact position where to embark the trench is selected. And once this position, or once the place of the trenching is selected, then the trench is always cut or trench is always embarked perpendicular to the scarp, so that each and every stratigraphy and the structural element can be studied. And even the profile of the scarp is done so that the exact displacement or the exact elevation, the vertical separation of this fault scarp can be estimated. So we have embarked one trench in the Hemi Basti area near the Subansari river across the 6.8 meter high scarp. The second trench we have embarked 120 or 130 kilometer east of this Hemi Basti area in Pasighat area across this 3.1 meter high scarp. And the third was embarked across this Mishmi thrust in this Kamlang Nagar area. And these all three sites, they fall in the mesoseismal zone of the 1950 earthquakes. So we were looking for the evidences of the 1950 earthquake, and we have selected these different sites. And this is a scarp. This is how the scarps they look in the field. And this is a fault scarp. Behind this fault scarp will be the sub-Himalayas. So first here is the trench that we excavated across the 3.1 meter high fault scarp in the Pasighat area. After confirming the fault scarp in the field, after carrying out this survey through this RTK GPS or the total station, these trenches are excavated by help of JCB or the backhoe. Once these walls are exposed, they are cleaned They are gridded at an interval of say 1 meter onto 1 meter or 2 meter into 2 meter. And then this entire thing, the entire stratigraphy along with the structural element that is present, they are logged manually as well as with the help of the total station survey. So if we see the first one is a photo mosaic and second one is a digitized log. So the first image here shows that there is a gravel unit. This gravel unit is overlain by the fine sediment, and even if we see the fine sediments, so toward the east we can see there is a dark colored brown layer. This brown layer is overlain by the gray colored layer, which is further overlain by say reddish layer. And now I will be just zooming into the western part. If we see the western part, then we see that in the western part, this gravel unit is thrusted over these fine sediments, forming a notch of the gravel, and in front of that notch again we see a very small scarplet. So all the stratigraphies, they are all the units, they are identified in the trench. Then different structural elements, they are identified, and the samples in a different media are taken both from the faulted as well as unfaulted units to bound the earthquake. So we are taking from the unfaulted unit to bound or to put the upper limit for an event. So here when we see this entire fine sediment is under thrusted beneath this gravel unit. So we have taken the charcoal sediment from here, we have taken even the bulk sediment samples, and when these different detrital charcoal or the bulk soil sediments, they were dated using this AMS C14 dating techniques. Then the calibrated ages, they shows the bimodal distribution, and since we are seeing the bimodal distribution in the field itself, we have identified that this dark red color thin layer is a paleosol. It has numerous rootlets and it was buried, and this fine layer of this reddish color layer, it got deformed along with the deformation of this gravel unit. But the overlying this gray color layer, it did not get deformed. So this third layer is interpreted, or this third unit is interpreted as a flood deposit, because this 1950 event was soon after this 1950 event, there was a flooding event, and this is a flood deposit of the 1950 event. And to confirm whether this is really a flood deposit or whether this is really a silty sediment, we have even performed the grain size analysis, and this grain size analysis, it even shows that this third unit, it shows a single fining upward sequence with abundance of the silty sediment. And further overlain by this third unit was this reddish brown color. So reddish brown color unit is deposited periodically by the nearby drainages, and it also shows this grain size analysis. It also shows the multiple fining upward event. Now, since we were looking for the surface rupture of 1950 event, so we went for even the analysis of the concentration of the cesium in this faulted unit as well as in the unfaulted unit. So we have analyzed the concentration of the cesium from the bulk soil sediment that we have collected in the vicinity from this unit 2, that's a buried soil layer in the vicinity of the fault zone, as well as we have collected the vertical seismic cesium profile from unit 2, unit 3 and the unit 4. And when we have analyzed the cesium concentration, then appreciable cesium concentration was seen in this unit 3, which is shown here in this multivariable plot in the left bottom by this black dot. Further, whether this cesium concentration, with this cesium, whatever we are getting the cesium, whether it is in situ or this concentration is because of the downward percolation from the overlying unit, for that we have gone for the clay mineralogy. And the clay mineralogy, they suggest that the overlying units, they have appreciable amount of the clay content in it, and these clay units, they have hindered the downward percolation of this the cesium that we found in this unit 2. plus this unit 2 only give the appreciable amount of the lead 210. This lead 210 it itself tell that the surface was stable at the timing of the seismic event. And this AMS dating the calibrated ages, they show the clear evidences of the 1950. But to check the reliability of this detrital charcoal sediments, we have performed the AMS dating of the bulk sediment soil that also gave the age near to this 1950 event. And apart from that, whether there are some inbuilt error with this carbon dating, so we went for the organic we went for this loss of ignition analysis, and this loss of ignition it also gave an appreciable amount of the organic content in this buried soil layer. And this buried soil layer, it indicates that this organic content is in situ. It is not from the mixing from the some say outer sources. So here we have identified the 5 units, and then we have based on the displacement and the dip of the fault in this area, we have estimated a dip slip displacement of approximately 5 meters, and that along the 55 degree dip of the positive fault, and this 3.1 meter of vertical separation that what we inferred was formed during the 1950 event. Then the second was in the Mishmi ranges. Mishmi range, the trench was embarked across this Mishmi thrust. I won't be going into much detail, and here we can see that there the 4 units that got deformed during the event, and the faulting of this blue color soil layer is very clear here. Apart from some dragging, and the folding is seen even in say the unit 4 also. And this 5th unit is now interpreted as a colluvium, which is deposited by the material that is scrapped off from this hanging wall block. And even the samples that are collected from this area, they also indicate that the event took place or the calibrated ages, they were constrained. The AMS or the detrital charcoal calibrated ages, they show that the event took place after this 1761 to 1968 CE. So we, just because we have the evidences, we have the records of the 1950 event in this area or in the vicinity of this area, so we interpret this deformation also correlates to the 1950 event. Now, apart from this, the Mishmi range do not have any historical record of the events prior to 1950 event. Second thing is we have we could see only the one colluvium in the trench. So we say that this 10-meter high scar was formed during the 1950 event by the slip of about 25 meters along say 30 degrees causative fault. Now, when we talk about this 1950 event, so 1950 event has ruptured the 2 different segments. It has ruptured the HFT also, it has ruptured the Mishmi thrust also. So 1950 has produced a dual surface rupture. It has ruptured the 2 different segments, and these 2 different segments, they have this strike. They have an orthogonal strike with each other. But further west of the Pasighat area, the first trench that we have just seen, further west of the Pasighat area, we have embarked a trench in the Hemibasti. And in this Hemibasti, though it falls in this mesoseismal zone of 1950 earthquake, but we did not see the evidences of 1950 event. Here, these clasts, they beautifully shows the folding of the south verging fold, and where the 2 units which is marked here as unit 1B and 1A, they got deformed. So they were present at the timing of the event. The folding of these events, these units took place, and after the deformation, only this yellow color colluvium or the colluvial wash was deposited. So the detrital charcoals that are collected from the faulted units, the total of the 19 detrital charcoals were collected from this faulted unit, unit B, which is actually a clay sand here, or These all indicate the calibrated ages of these detrital charcoals. They indicate that this event took place prior to 1950, and since in the vicinity of this zone we have the historical records of the 17th century earthquake, that's in 1697, so we conclude that this area Hemi-Basti, it got deformed between 1445 and 1893 CE, and since we have a record of this 1697 earthquake, that's a 17th century event, so we collaborate or we correlate this event with the 17th century event, and this 17th century event has produced a vertical separation of say 6.8 meters during along this positive fault of 25 degrees with a dip slip displacement of about 15 meter. It is just whatever compilation of all these three trenches where the 1950 has ruptured, has produced a surface rupture at the Pasighat area along this HFT and at the Kamlang Nagar area along this Mishmi thrust, but we did not find any signature of 1950 in this Hemi-Basti area. Another thing is all these trenches, they show only single rupture. They do not show the multiple events. So it was it's very difficult for us to talk about the recurrence interval in this area. But now when we talk about this Hemi-Basti area has witnessed the historical earthquake. So using this the data set that is present, or using the intensity prediction equation and the earthquake size scaling law of the available data set, the magnitude of 7.7 to 8.1 is estimated for this 1697 event, and it is also seen that this 1697 event has ruptured the segment of about 100 kilometer, and this in vicinity or to the west of this 17th century event, we also have the evidence of the 1740 Bhutan earthquake, but this Bhutan earthquake did not propagate all the way to the Indian part or the Indian Himalayas because of the presence of this transverse Kopili fault. Earlier, the importance of this transverse structures were not given, but recently these transverse structures, for example here the Kopili fault is basically responsible, that has obstructed the rupture of propagation along the strike rupture propagation of this 1714 Bhutan earthquake. So this Hemi-Basti site, we conclude that this Hemi-Basti site is got deformed during the 1697. Though these two earthquakes, they are very closely spaced, and the timing between them is even less than 2 decades, but these two segments, though they are in very close vicinity to each other, but they have been ruptured by two different earthquakes. Now, we do not find, we have investigated these three sites that are shown here in the yellow squares, where these two sites marked as A and B, they show the evidences of 1950 event, whereas this D shows the evidences of the 1697 event. We do not see any evidence of 1950 here. So we can say that even in the eastern part of the Eastern Himalaya, it has witnessed the three earthquakes that have ruptured the three different segments, where 1950 earthquake, it has produced a dual surface rupture, 1697 it has ruptured a segment of approximately 100 kilometer, and with an aid of the available data set, the magnitude of this earthquake is estimated to roughly about the 7.9. Now, and another thing is that some numeric values is written here, and these are the geodetic convergence rate. So if we see these numeric values, we see that there is overall increase in the geodetic convergence rate. If there is an increase in the geodetic convergence rate, so there should be an increase in the seismicity towards the east, but our observation, they do not show the increase in the seismicity in this region. We do not see the multiple events in our trenches. Rather, this white square, it was a paleoseismic investigation that was done in a Marbang area, where they have the workers, they have estimated 2 events. So if we focus on this event, the first event that posted about 500 BC to 66 CE, and the latest event, that is 1950 event. So for this particular segment, we can say that the recurrence interval is about 1800. But if suppose, if we do not have any idea about this segment between C and D, and this D has altogether a different earthquake, if this D would have been hit by 1950 event, then we can easily say that the recurrence interval in this zone is about, say, 300 years. But and if we see, even if the workers in the further west in the Nepal Himalayas, they have shown the recurrence interval of about 700 to 900 years with the interseismic events of with 4 to 5 interseismic events. So we conclude that the Himalayan arc do not follow characteristic earthquake cycles. There exists a non-characteristic earthquake cycles. So a single model won't going to fulfill the purpose of this recurrence interval estimation for the entire Himalaya, and for this lot of work need to be done in close vicinity. And as I was talking about this convergence rate, since convergence rate, geodetic convergence rate is increasing toward east, but our observation, they do not show the increase in the seismicity. So this further indicate that there is a strain partitioning in this Mishmi range, and the evidence of the strain partitioning toward the foreland is present in form of the growing Manabam anticline. And at last, this is a cartoon that shows this is the epicentral location of the 1950, and at this 1950 earthquake, it has ruptured along the HFT also and along this Mishmi thrust also. So we have a dual surface ruptures, and these segments that have ruptured the 2 different segments that have us that strikes almost orthogonal to each other. And this is the last slide. This slide shows there are the different polygons. So this, if we see these polygons, this slide shows the slip deficit budget. So if we assume that the particular segment having a particular event, and all the accumulated strain is released during that last earthquake in a particular segment, still there is lot of slip deficit in an area. For instance, if we talk about this area that is hit by 1950 earthquake, where we have the ruptures of the 1950 earthquake, since this 1950 earthquake, even there is a slip deficit of about 1.3 along the Himalayan arc, and about the 1.4 meter of slip deficit along this Mishmi thrust or in the Mishmi range. And these slip deficit has a potential to trigger an earthquake with a magnitude of 7. And if we focus this entire zone, the eastern part of the eastern Himalaya, then there is a slip deficit that varies from 1.3 meter to about 15 meter. And this slip deficit, they have the potential to give rise to earthquake, large to great earthquake along this HFT as well as this MT. I'm not going into detail about this zone, since I have shown the evidences for this eastern part of the eastern Himalaya in the vicinity of the eastern Himalayan syntaxes. So this is where this is a region where there is an appreciable slip deficit, and this slip deficit, they are sufficient enough to produce the future earthquake having a magnitude of large to great earthquake. So I thank everyone for their patience, and I especially want to thank my teammate. And all the work has been done under the guidance of Dr. R.J. Perumal. He's a senior scientist in Vadia, and all the work was done This entire thing could not be possible, would have not been possible without the help of this Dr. Arjun Pandey, who is a research associate in Padua Institute of Himalayan Geology at present, and Dr. Ishwar Singh, who is geologist in a Spanish firm. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Priyanka. So now the talk is open for discussion.
Okay, can I?
Please, sir, please.
Okay, firstly, I must congratulate the speaker, Dr. Rao. It was a awesome work, beautifully presented and very painstakingly researched. Congratulations for this wonderful work.
Thank you, sir.
Something I was feeling is that in order to understand the seismicity, the way you also described, we have to go back to the Himalayan tectonics also. Two things that came to my mind. One is you said you talked about the shortening between India, the northward movement of the Indian plate, and you say more than half is accommodated in the Himalayan part, and about 1/3 is being accommodated by deformation in Tibet. But I was wondering, in the Himalayan part, we can see evidences of this deformation. We see thrust, we see recent movements, we see landslides, we see all kinds of tectonic activities. In Tibet, we don't see any earthquakes. We hardly see much earthquake. We hardly see any thrusting. We hardly see those kind of stuff. So is it possible that maybe some other mechanism somewhere else is working? Associated with the same question is, when you talked about deformation, recent work shows that the Himalayan part, south of Indus Future, was about 1,200 kilometers wider than what we have today. And only a part of that is possibly associated with the thrusting related shortening. So is there something we are missing? If we are missing those other mechanism of shortening, then we are possibly, our entire model might be somewhat, defective. And the other associated question I had was when you talked about Eastern Himalaya, that was actually main part of your research. The old tectonics, of course, is not your research. So, really, I don't really want to press or ask question much about that. On the Eastern Himalayas, you showed the difference in seismicity between the 1950 earthquake in Mishmi Hills and the other earthquake in Hemis and Sadia. And you showed the difference in them also. And you said that there's no evidence, though no reflection of the 1950 earthquake in Sadia areas. And that's what expected, right? Because the Mishmi Hills, the place you are looking at, that's kind of northeast of what is called the Tooting suture. And the mode of deformation there is totally different from the mode of deformation that we see in the Himalayas. These are all thrust related. In the one in the Mishmi that you showed, in one of your slides, you also had one of those, beach balls, those fault plane solution. That also showed strike slip kind of movement. You also showed a strike slip fault there, the PC fault, the Poku Choyo fault, I think. Yeah, if you look at that, what is the fault plane solution for that one?
Sir, actually the fault plane solution for this 1950, it has both the component of a thrust and the strike slip. So it is having the two component. It not only have only one component, but it have a two components. It's an oblique slip fault.
Exactly. And that's true about all along that border. They have a strong component of strike slip. So the nature of deformation there is very different from the nature of deformation that you see in the Himalayan foothills. And we are talking about two different tectonic blocks, two different mechanisms. If you have to compare the 1950 earthquake, you should go into central Tibet or Burma, Western Burma, central Burma, Chin basins. Those earthquakes will possibly have a similar solutions and similar characteristics like the Mishmi, compared to what you see in the Himalayan foothills. That's all. But again, congratulations for the wonderful work. If you had not done this work, this would not have come in front.
Thank you, sir. So can you please repeat your second question?
The one on the Mishmi Hills, right? The last part.
No, sir. The second question. I just totally forgot your second
So the
question.
Himalayas, in the Himalayas, they say the recent work, the paleomagnetic work, they say that the entire Himalayan belt, the way we see now, it was much wider than what it was.
Huh.
It was, I mean, even at that time, it was several thousand kilometers wide, possibly. So a lot of deformation took place. So which means that it was an extended terrain. So a lot of deformation took place first to accommodate that extension to non-extended situation, and then I mean the deformation after that is reflected in the thrusting. So a lot of northward movement of post-collisional northward movement of Indian plate is not necessarily taken up by the thrusting in India or Tibet also. Before that also there's a large component of that northward movement of Indian plate that could have been accommodated in the present day Himalayas without the thrusting that we see nowadays. I mean, the present research shows that there were zones of extension all around the Himalayas, and I have also done some work there also. And so first those extended zones were collapsed, and then the thrusting started. That's what I'm saying. So if you try to explain the entire northward movement of India, shortening between India and, say, Asian land, just by thrusting, the present thrust that we see, MCT and MBF and Himalayan frontal thrust, that might kind of overestimate the amount of thrusting that we are trying to accommodate.
Sir, even whatever we are doing in that, we are not taking into consideration the internal deformation or the subsurface structure of this HFT, or whatever we are doing is something that is exposed in the trench. So that even whatever we are estimating, I think that is the minimum what we are estimating.
Okay, good. I accept.
Yeah, I was trying to ask one question.
Yes, sir.
You have shown that the between tactile transition zone, the higher Himalaya in other places, and in case of the 1950 earthquake, the rupture zone is far east of that place, the Posu Fault. What could be the explanation for?
Goswami sir, actually, can you please repeat your question, because your voice was quite low. I could not able to hear you properly.
You have shown that you have mentioned that between ductile transition zone below the higher Himalaya, or the entire seismic lock zone there, for the seismicity to be occurred. But in case of 1950 earthquake, the rupture zone is far east of that place.
Yes, sir.
So what do you think? What could be the reason for taking place a rupture far east of that place? Because it is Posu Fault. It is far east of the higher Himalayan part, actually, that is in that part, in the Mississippi Hills.
So, sir, here also, whatever structure we see for the Himalayan range, similar structure, similar sort of geometry we see here. But the only difference is here like in the Mishmi ranges also. If we see the Moho is comparatively shallower. As Moho goes up to say 55 kilometer in this Mishmi ranges, but it goes up to say 70 kilometer in this Mishmi ranges. And apart from that, when we talk about the locking width is also very less in the Mishmi ranges. So overall, when we see this is also the subduction zone. The two are the subduction zone. But overall, when we talk about these information that we have got from the geodetic studies, they are same in this Himalaya as well as in the Mishmi. This holds true both for this because both are the subduction, and this is something locking, and the continuously creeping is not only specific to the Himalaya. It is in all the orogenic subduction settings, subduction orogeny settings. So.
Yeah, that's correct. But I am just asking you about the rupture zone, the Posu Fault, which is actually far east of that particular higher Himalayan part. What is actually I want to ask you. Anyway, thank you.
Yes, subduction is between two plates. Within a plate, should we call it subduction? I don't know.
Abhinavada has something to say.
Hi. I think in continuity with Dr. Simal, I must also congratulate you for your excellent talk.
Thank you, sir.
But you know, an excellent talk or a beautiful model always invites plethora of questions. So this is not the venue for asking the different questions. I will be just curious to know, for my clarification, a simple thing you are talking that earthquake is responsible for mountain uplift. Is it
Yes.
always true? Or the fault movement you can should say could be, but not the earthquake. Earthquake takes place only very rarely along the fault
Uh,
movement.
Sir, my thing is, I take in a two way. Like people, they generally say earthquake they are generated because of the this faultings. But the thing is, I'm not. Okay, here is like mountain do not rise without earthquake. So this earthquake they are also contributing something in
That
the
is common,
upliftment
but
of the
you
mountain.
very statement that everybody knows that I am a man of faith. So, but question is that a statement that plain statement is sometimes misnomer. That's the point I was raising. Understand?
Yes.
Secondly, very nice. Secondly, that what is the slip vector for the old faults? You are finding out the fault field solutions and finding out that the shift. The really fault vector, I mean slip vector, is a very difficult thing. Just by a vertical separation or horizontal separation does not give you the vector. An oblique slip you can draw, that the actual slip vector you have to find out. That is visible. Then only you can see or you can work out on these things. That's very important. I think too much stretching of imaginations by drawing this as, I mean, fault plane solutions of the 1950s, everything, and their shift. I mean, that lift, uplift, or all these things. Okay, fine, a good model, but question is, it we have to take sometimes with an iota of salt. That's the point. This is the thing. I think we could have been restricting to these things, certain points and their interpretation. Third point is, you are telling subduction is still continuing. This is a very, it's not very clear. When these two
Sir,
continents have been merged and they are colliding, whether the terminology of subduction could be said. You said Indian plate is still going below with the same orientation below the Tibetan plateau. Is it a new model? There is no change of this lithosphere, or
uh,
that is not delaminated
sir,
by
it's
geologists?
it's detached, sir. It's detached, and if I have used the term subduction, then I would want to just replace it with the convergence. Convergence is still taking place, and
That I do not disagree. That's a good one. But subduction, as a classical geologist, I have the problem of accepting. This is the thing. Okay, otherwise it's a good one. But as Shantanu also raised the point about the brittle versus ductile, this point also please look at them. Our point is, most of these faults, as you see in Himalaya, they are actually brittle ductile in nature. They are not strictly brittle or strictly ductile accesses. So closer examination of the field, I mean petrography is very essential. Third point is, you have done much of work of the seismites because some of the faults you have shown, these faults appear to me only some structures maybe related to the seismic events, but from them you cannot work out the direction of slip. They only give a recumbent or like structure or some local scale fault, but that has nothing to do about the orientation of the large scale faults.
uh,
Thank you, Abhinavada. Do you have anything to say to Dr. Rai, Priyanka?
sir,
You
shall
want
I
to
give my
reply?
view? Sir, shall I give my view?
Sure.
Sir, like we say, कि whenever this mid-crustal thrust they emerge from the deeper part. Whenever they come towards the surface, they splay into different splays. They simply bifurcates or lots of splays
Priyanka,
they come out.
Priyanka, this you are saying that they take different way, they bifurcate.
No, sir. Sir, exactly. Overall, they are following like this. If I'm saying this, there is some youngest thrust, that is a HFT. So when HFT is coming to the surface, so just some HFT is placed into the different branches, and that is why I said we are not taking exactly into consideration the exact geometry below the star. If whatever splay I'm showing in my trench, they are the splay of HFT only.
How do you know that? How do you know that, Priyanka?
So, sir, I mean, this is what the geodetic surveys they.
No. Geologic survey doesn't say this. Geologic survey doesn't say this.
And sir, the youngest, sir, if we are getting something at the front, so that is the youngest one only. Youngest is the HFT. So something, and we all know that HFT is still active. So if we are getting something at the mountain front, so that would be the youngest one only, and they are the something. And even sir, if they are not displayed, maybe when they are coming, reaching to the surface, so the geometry of this HFT is somewhat changing.
Okay, could be. Okay, there is a question in the chat box. Yeah, anyone, please?
Let me answer this question. Means why HFT is releasing all the strain. Different tectonogeomorphic studies says by dating frontal geomorphic surface suggests that all the entire strain between the frontal to MCT is about 20 mm per year is releasing along the HFT. Different tectonics like strategy shows and suggests that entire strain whatever accumulating within the Himalayas is actually releasing along the HFT. That's why we are focusing on active tectonics, means like paleoseismology. That's the reason we say means the great earthquake.
Shantanu, may I ask something?
No, before you, there is a question in the chat box. I want to share with Priyanka. Priyanka,
Yes, sir,
there
I
is a
can read.
question in the chat box.
Yeah.
Sir, I can see
Dr.
that.
Pushpendu Shah has asked here.
How does the convergence rate control the seismicity in the mountain belt? Does convergence rate control the brittle strength of the fault? Okay. Sir, when we talk about this convergence rate means whenever we are bringing two blocks towards each other, and if we do not see any deformation when the two plates are converging and the deformation, we cannot see that the ongoing deformation. So that means that there is an elastic strain that is getting. That's why we are using a term elastic. We cannot see that deformation, that Himalaya is growing very quickly. We know that those convergence is of say 40 millimeter per year convergence is taking place, and 40 millimeter convergence mean every time this rise should actually balance this 40 millimeter of convergence. So when we talk about this accumulated strain, so accumulated strain mean near that zone some deformation is taking place, and that deformation is elastic. And whenever there some threshold limits, there is a threshold limits, and when that limits exceeds, then only the seismicities they are taking place. So because of this convergence only, there is an accumulation of the strain, and this accumulated strain only triggers the earthquake, and this accumulated strain only releases in form of an earthquake, which we call as the seismicity, sir.
Okay, I don't know whether Pushpendu has accepted this, but he can write.
Then his mic is not working, so I think he can't respond. Yeah.
But I think his question was different. So far, I understand. Once you said
hello.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Are you satisfied with the answer?
Yeah.
Yes.
No. Actually, my question is so far we know that convergence rate. How we calculate the convergence rate? It's a long time scale calculation, right? So does it means that the if we have low convergence rate, it will not generate seismicity?
No, sir. When we talk about the convergence rate, sir, we are saying that's approximately 40 millimeter of convergence across the Himalaya, sir. But this convergence itself is changing from northwest to northeast. If we talk about the convergence in the northwest, it's about say 40 millimeter per year. But when we move
no. My question is very simple. That is, if you have convergence rate of 40 40 centimeter or 40 millimeter per year, and if you have convergence rate of 20 millimeter per year, so how this higher amount of convergence rate, how this yeah, how does the earthquake or short term seismicity control the convergence rate?
Sir, higher the convergence rate mean more the accumulation of the strain, but the
That means more the seismicity, right?
Sir, more the seismicity, but apart from that seismicity, if that convergence is getting partitioned, if we are not, suppose if all the convergence is getting released along these faults, mean we are getting the fault scarp. But suppose if that strain is getting partitioned, so we will be getting like these dunes and the valley structures. We won't be getting all these, or we will be getting the fault related folded structure, just like this we get in this northwestern Himalayas or in the central Himalaya. Yes sir, yes sir.
Yeah, I think there are many questions, many other queries.
Okay sir.
So
Yes,
I think
sir.
you can talk to Pushpendu
Yes sir.
later again.
Okay.
But
Okay.
what I understand that Pushpendu's question was very straightforward. Okay. Anyway, Dr. Anupam Chattopadhyay, please.
Professor Dilip, okay.
Dilip has raised a hand. I think he should be given a chance to.
No, you
Anupam, you finish, then I'll just.
Okay.
Sure.
So, congratulations, Priyanka. I missed much of your lecture because of some other work, but more or less this work I have listened to part of this work from Perumal himself. So I am asking a different question, not related to your work directly. That is, right now we are having a discussion on the convergence rate vis-a-vis the number of earthquakes. Now my question is whether a fault, whatever be the slip rate on the fault or the bulk convergence rate, does it really control the earthquakes? Because I think after all the seismic or aseismic movement is all a game of stable versus unstable friction in the fault. So does it really affect or be affected by the large scale convergence rate over the Himalayas?
Sir, one thing that I can say is the geometry of this, what we say, the fault, they really control the nucleation of these earthquakes. Like I said, when we talk about this mid-crustal thrust, that is a main Himalayan thrust. So main Himalayan thrust, we have this ramp and flat geometry. So this geometry is playing an important role. Apart from that, sir, rheology, they do also play an important role.
No, that this is playing an important role. That is an interpretation. Overall, it's an intuition, you can say. But as far as the material properties are concerned, the rheology and the frictional property, that actually controls the seismicity or aseismic nature of a fault. That is well established in material science and earthquake mechanics. So here, I think, because this was already asked to you by Pushpendu, that's why I'm taking up this issue, is that you have to think really, I do not know the answer. I don't know whether there is a very clear answer to whether the bulk convergence rate of the Himalayas will really control the number of earthquakes occurring in the Himalayas. That is one question that I give to you. And another one, the second one, before that, Dr. Ishwar Singh was explaining that the whole of the Himalayas right now, whatever strain or due to the convergence within the Himalayas is being manifested along the HFT. So if all the strain is accommodated by movement of the active HFT, then how come there are large earthquakes occurring on the MCT? Because you are seeing the Gorkha earthquake has been a movement on the MCT, a devastating large earthquake. So how come that explains that if there is no strain accumulation or no locking inside, if HFT does all the trick, then how come you are having so much out of sequence fault movements and earthquakes behind? Okay, this is my question. Thank you.
Priyanka, anything to say?
Sir, again, like in case of since we are seeing this entire deformation is constrained between MCT and HFT. This HFT is when we talk about this great earthquake. Great earthquake will be propagating all the way through this HFT. But when we talk about the large earthquake, since just like sir said, they will be actually they will be rupturing the surface in the hinterland part, just like as happened with this Gorkha earthquake. But Gorkha earthquake, the important thing is it did not rupture the ground surface. It could not able to rupture the ground surface. Whatever the accumulated strain was there, there was a eastward propagation of the rupture, not exactly rupture, the waves they propagated the eastward, and further they have now transferred that strain in the adjoining areas. So adjoining areas, even if suppose adjoining area will be having some strain, and this further accumulated or the transferred strain by this 2050 earthquake, that may going to trigger the another say great event which will be propagating all the way to the surface along this HFT. That's what I can say, sir.
So Priyanka, you are saying that your great earthquakes will occur towards the foreland.
Sir, great earthquake will rupture, it will going to unzip the entire log portion and they will be reaching the front of the Himalaya. There lies a difference between the great earthquake and the large earthquake. Large
This
earthquake.
is an assumption. This is an assumption, right?
Yeah, because actually, Priyanka, if you look
just a
at the
minute.
spatial distribution of the
Just a minute.
epicenter along the Himalaya.
Large earthquake, by the term large earthquake, generally we mean, although it's just an adjective, but we just mean that it has a very high rate of, total energy released by the earthquake is large. That means that's a large seismic moment. And I'm not very sure what do you mean by the term great earthquake.
Sir, great earthquake are those earthquakes that have the magnitude more than 8. Equivalent to they have magnitude equal or more than 8. Whereas,
You are right.
So that is seismic moment only.
But thing is, that is the moment.
yes, sir, but I'm saying one thing, but if the large earthquake fails to rupture the surface, they do not release the energy, because when those earthquakes, they did not, either, sir, they will be, that energy will be consumed in the formation of the fault-related folds or the folded structures. So that energy will be consumed in that way.
There are two hands of Dilip. So I will first ask Professor Dilip Shah.
Well, thank you, Shantanu. Thank you, Shantanu. Thank you, Priyanka, for addressing all these, very stimulating questions. Well, as an undergraduate, I learned that the maximum amount of elastic strain that can be accommodated in a brittle material is less than 1%. So I think when you are saying that whether it is a locking due to a great earthquake or locking related to large earthquakes and the convergence rate, do you think that all this large amount of strain energy would be stored by less than 1% deformation?
Priyanka.
Yes, sir.
Did you get the question?
Yes, sir. I could follow, sir, but sir, when we say this locking and the creeping means during this interseismic periods, we do not observe any sort of seismic activity. We do not see any sort of movement along that segments.
The other movement you do not observe because this is a slower movement than the seismic slip. What I think Anupam was trying to hint at. This is one. Yeah. Second thing is that you said that the Gorkha earthquake, which you categorized as a great earthquake, I suppose.
No, large earthquake.
So large earthquake. Gorkha is a large earthquake.
So it's a large earthquake, but it did not rupture the surface. It occurred, say, in the vicinity of the MCT, and it did not occur at the surface. So, for example, if I now come to the so-called Pasighat earthquake, 1950 earthquake, the magnitude is same, right? So I would expect the similar sort of seismic energy was released during that period. So why do you think that that it ruptured the entire length from the locking point in the MHT right up to, say, the frontal part of the Himalaya. You see, I would expect the rupture dimension to be proportional to the energy release. I mean, that's what the seismologists tell us. I mean, I am not a seismologist, but that's what the books tell us. So how do you explain this?
So Priyanka, you can think on it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think
Sir,
it's a very valid question.
Sir, given a
suggestion.
permission, sir, given a
Yeah,
permission,
sure.
I have my co-worker here. If the co-worker knows the answer, can he be
Okay,
allowed?
sure. I think Ishwar is there, right?
Yeah, Ishwar.
Hello.
Do you have
Hello,
anything
sir.
to say on this? Yeah.
Yeah, sir. I think what the lecturer is saying about 1% of storing in the brittle part is he is right. Actually, the amount of strain that has limit, all and that strain limit that actually control the timing of the great earthquake or large earthquake. Both large as well as great earthquake, I think, capable to make surface rupture depending from where they initiate their this thing slip, and the amount of great earthquake, it is largely controlled, this strain is largely controlled with the segment that is involved during the this thing surface rupture event. Like for the 1950, actually, the segment that got broke during the 1950, it is quite big. And then if there are many empirical relation that suggests if your area and length, means width and length, is increasing, and you have even say less amount of strain accumulation, even that zone can result into a big great earthquake. Like also one sir was initially was saying if what will happen if small amount of strain is accommodating, and what if the large strain rate across some range across. And my answer is for that is again same, means both have capability to form a great event or a earthquake of very great magnitude. It all depends upon the rheology as well as the amount of the area that get involved during a rupture. That's what I want to say only.
And also the nucleation, where exactly it is nucleating.
So you are saying that
Nucleation
it
is
has
largely controlled the segment only.
MHT. So you are saying that on one side you are saying that it may not have nucleated from the MHT, right?
No, sir, they are
No,
nucleated from MHD only. But
sir, in case of Himalaya, all the major thrusts are sold into MHT only.
MHD only.
In case if if MCT gets earthquake, means if there's a small patch, actually, if you see the width then there's not a big patch like HFT that makes around 100-kilometer wide zone. For MCT, it will be a smaller patch around 50 or 20 or 30-kilometer wide. While the segment length is also matter, then ultimately it will result in a small magnitude earthquake, not as big as HFT will result. That's what I want to say.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
I missed some of your answer because the audio quality was not good at my laptop. Only comment I would like to make is that, say, for example, you can say propose a conceptual model. There is no harm in doing that, but you have to kind of reconcile the slip rates, the amount of elastic strain that can be scored given under rheology, as well as, say, when you are saying only part of the fault is ruptured, you should know, say, for example, your, say, strike length is the rupture strike length.
Means the area. What do you mean? Hello, sir. We are not audible. You are not audible, sir. Sir, Professor Shah. I think
Sir, his
connection is
video is freezed somehow.
Yeah. Can you go with Professor Dilip
Dilip
Mukhopadhyay, sir?
Mukhopadhyay, yes, sir. Yes.
Sir.
Okay, Priyanka, you speak very well. And
Thank you, sir.
obviously, you are very young, and at this age, if you speak very well, I'm really glad on that. Comment I have, first is a comment and then a question. The comment that I have, that you try to beat more than you can achieve, because your data is essentially 3 trenches, right? And half of your talk about Himalayan tectonics, strain rate, and sleep rate, and all that. And that's why all these illustrious fellows who have done a lot of work before you, someday you will also do great work. All these fellows are asking the questions. And much of the questions are not really related to your work. And you invited those questions. That is the problem. Because you talked about convergence and thrust and this, that, and fault-related folds. The geometry that you showed is not a fault-related fold anyway. But that's unimportant. So please confine to your own work, and then you interpret whatever you want to interpret. But don't extend everything to the Himalayas, because then Himalayas, you have not solved most of the 99% of the problem as yet. Right? And all these gentlemen who are asking questions, there is no clear-cut and straightforward answer also. So because you are young, I am telling you this, I am very old man, that stay within your comfort zone. Right? Otherwise, I see sometimes you are flustered. Right? That you can avoid by not getting into a big problem of Himalayan tectonics.
Sir, thank you for your suggestion, sir. I will be following your suggestion,
Right.
sir.
Okay. There's no hard feeling, you know. I'm just, because you are very
No,
young.
sir.
You are very young, that's why I'm telling. I always give advice to young students. Can I see your one of the pits in which show a fault and then a blue colored folded kind of structure, long term or something? Oh yeah, this one. Can you remove the blue color?
Sir, actually, that is. Sir, just give me a minute. I will be just bringing that photo mosaic for you, sir.
If it is too difficult, let us forget it.
No, sir. Just a moment. Just a moment, sir. Sir, is my screen visible?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It is.
Yes, sir.
Now I don't see the fold at all. I don't
Sir,
see the fault at all.
wait, sir. I will just zoom into this area.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So, sir, this is the slide. They say then we see a very beautiful bend like this, and then there
Right.
is a dragging. Then we see a beautiful fold. This is the same layer, the sandy soil, which is going in the hanging wall like this. And this is a line that shows the place along which dragging took place, and this is the one. I'm just removing everything because we are showing the very big data on a very limited scale. So this is that fine sediment layer that is going like this, then it is taking a bend from here. And the alignment of these class, they also mark the zone along which this dragging took place. And again, we find this notch here, then again this layer is now getting and bending like this.
What this marker consists of, you are showing in the fold, so it has to be a marker.
No, sir, it is there. I can zoom in more for the better clarity, sir.
No, marker. She's now placing. No.
The marker layer.
Marker
So
layer.
this is a marker horizon, sir. This is a marker horizon. If you see the
So
pointer.
it consists of what? Silt, sand.
Sir, it's a
Clay,
silty sand. Sir, it's a silty sand, sir. This one, the pointer, this one.
Yeah.
And it's sandwiched between the class supported units, sir.
Now, Priyanka, the problem is also there that in this part, these foreland areas or these foreland basins, if I talk about, or only foreland part, then these regions, they have a very chaotic assemblage, melange.
Yeah, that's right.
So how can you separate these layers like this, or how can you find out the true stratigraphy from a melange?
Okay, on a lighter note, she has taken training for 4 years, my friend Shande, to identify this.
No.
So, sir, actually, when we go to the field, sir, what I said that we grid this entire wall, and then we map each and every. We see each and every. Even if we are seeing the pebble cobble, we used to separate them from one another. Whether the cobble here, like if we see this one, unit 1 is also class supported, unit 3 is also class supported, but there exist a facies variations. There exist some lithological variations. So this is a minute study that one can do only in the field. When
No, you
the
can
trench
say
is-
there is variation in size. You cannot say there is a variation in lithology, because some pebbles might have traveled from the lesser Himalaya. Some cobbles might have traveled from the Shivalik part. So how can you possibly say there is a lithological variation? I'm not getting this part.
Sir, I mean, that's a litho units, whatever units we are seeing here. Lithology doesn't mean that lithology, we're talking in terms of the formation or the group. I'm just talking about this fluvial sediments, whatever we are getting. So one unit is differentiated from the another unit. So that litho units I'm telling, sir.
This is okay. Okay.
Okay. And
Other
there
thing
is
that
a-
I would like to say is that you said all these are class supported, but to me they look like matrix supported conglomerate.
Sir, basically this is a gravel unit, sir. This is a gravel unit.
Oh yes,
And
I know.
yes,
I know.
yeah, sir, I agree with you. Class supported means the class, they are not in touch with each other perfectly, and
They are not at all. They are not at all in touch with each other.
Yes.
Not perfectly or otherwise.
Yes, sir. Sir, it
These
seems
are
as if
valid.
they are floating in the matrix, sir. I agree with you, sir. Sorry.
Priyanka, Shantanu, I just
Yeah,
asked
the-
a question with this photograph. That's why just if you
Okay. Please
allow me.
Okay. Yeah,
Priyanka,
Yes, sir.
Priyanka, in that photograph, just if you show that cross section, I'm not arguing with any of your interpretations. That is absolutely fine. It's yours. Only my query is, along that fault that you have drawn, the amount of slip in this portion of the fault, in the blue part portion, and just maybe within 1 meter, the fault dies completely. So because you see the upper layer, your layer 4, it doesn't virtually show any kind of offset. So what is the mechanism by which this much of slip on, say, within a meter scale can be totally accommodated by a fault? I mean, by the surrounding material to end the fault.
Sir, for that we have done this retro deformation study. We carried out the line length balancing and the area balancing studies. Then sir, we did those things. I did not specify here, and we have carried out those retro deformation studies. And from that, we have estimated the slip in the trench, as well as the slip. There are some uncertainties with the fault and the internal deformation that is not exposed in the trench. So we have done those work also to come to this conclusion. This one.
Priyanka,
But this is
just
expected. This is expected if sedimentation is going on along with the faulting. So the older beds will show more slip, and the younger beds will show less slip. And of
No,
course, if the nature of sediment allows for some internal deformation, then you'll see even less slip.
So that means the fault, the upper part was later than the activation of the fault, initial activation of the fault.
Yes. Yes.
Could be. Okay.
now,
Yes.
the most important thing is, even if you do retrodeformation, you take the slip to retrodeform a section, not the other way around. The slip is determined from two cutoff points. This is cardinal principle in balancing cross sections.
Yes, sir.
And believe me, I know a thing or two about balancing cross section.
Yes, sir.
It is only two cutoff points that you determine slip and use that slip to retrodeform a fold, not the other way around. So your statement is wrong, that you retrodeformed and found out the slip. And still Anupam's point is still valid, that why suddenly it dies.
Okay,
To
Priyanka, I
understand from
think
Dr. Srimal's statement is that Dilipda, what they are suggesting is that the blue layer was faulted first, and then the upper layer was deposited, and then again the fault moved, but a small distance, so it shows small layer. But then there will be a certain kind of,
hiatus.
some kind of hiatus or some
Right,
kind
right.
of a break in the sequence. It doesn't look like that.
Sir,
There's the
and we do
problem.
not-
There's
sir,
the
we do
problem
not-
with me, Priyanka. There's the problem with me
Looks like
to
a dragging
correlate this
effect.
thing, correlate this type of fault with a very mega or large
Yes,
earthquake.
yes.
That's really a problem with me,
Problem.
because we have done some mechanical model to show that you can have series of thrust in the top crustal part where you don't need the basal decolumar to activate. If you have a very different lithological layering, you can generate thrust from the weak layer. There will be That's the reason I was asking several times whether this fault have originated from MST. How do you know that? There is some mechanical issues.
Sir, even if suppose, like sir said, there would have been a first faulting event, and during that faulting event, this blue layer got displaced, and at that time, some deposition might be taking place. But sir, we do not say that to colluvium. Actually, we cannot neglect the colluvium also, sir.
Just a moment. Here, that is called a growth fold. Okay? That's called a growth fold. And this does not look like a growth fold.
Another problem might be the way the lines are drawn. If you follow these lines subclassed over here, what I'm seeing, the form surface might not be exactly what the black line shows.
Okay, I think thank you very much for a very good discussion. I think Sumitra is there.
Yes, Professor Sumitra is waiting here.
Professor Sumitra is waiting. He has a query. Priyanka.
Okay, it's quite late in the day. I just have a query in one of the sections or one of the slides. Probably in the Pasighat area trench, you had calculated a slip of about 24 meter. Can you go back to this slide, or did I just want to confirm that?
Sir, not in Pasighat, in this area only. The dip slip displacement is 24 meters. In this
24 meters. Is it a cumulative or on the single event?
Sir, it's a single event, sir.
It is a single event slip of 24 meters. Okay, in the Andaman Sumatra Aceh earthquake, the slip was 16 meters, 16. It had ruptured about 1600 kilometer long segment of the fault zone with pauses of 1 or 2 seconds in between. So
causing 9 magnitude earthquake, right?
in a 16-meter slip created an earthquake of +9, and probably the third largest earthquake in the instrument recorded history. So 24-meter slip of the Pasighat, was it for the 19?
So this is for the 1950, where the slip of 24 has created a scar vertical separation. That's a vertical separation of say 10 meters, sir.
No, so displacement you had measured, you had estimated from the slip, from the trench, is about 24 meters in a single slip. So
sir,
these
the trench, sir, what we have measured in a trench, the displacement is 16 meter. Am I right? Am I right, Ishwar?
If it's 15 meters, then well, it is not much different. But if it is 24 meters, I was comparing with the 16-meter displacement and its effect, havoc it caused. Compared to that, 1950 earthquake do not have, that is quite well documented in the memory. No. 24 meters, that is completely out of proportion, completely much less.
Sir. If we consider this trench, then I remember the slip is around say 5 meters along a 16-meter fault. But then we have taken into consideration the subsurface uncertainties, and from those subsurface uncertainties that I was talking about, the area balancing. From that, we have estimated the dip of the fault that is actually buried beneath this scar. That fault is a 25 degree dip, and that has displaced that had a displacement of 25 meters, approximately 25 meters, to give rise to this 10-meter scar. So if we just focus on the trench, then the trench, there is a slip of about say 4 to 5 meter slip. But since we are getting a scar of 10 meters, so slip of 4 meters along the 16 degree fault won't be producing the 10-meter high scar. That what we can see from this.
Okay.
But even if it is a 24-meter sleep, are you sure that all of these are produced by a seismic sleep, or there may be a component of a seismic creep? How did you differentiate how much is seismic event sleep or how much is a seismic creep along the fault? It is not uncommon. San Andreas fault creeps and then sleeps.
Yeah.
These are, Priyanka, again, I mean, in the line of we are not asking this to in any way embarrass
any question.
These are fundamental questions that you, as a very young worker, and I know you were in GSI also, I am aware with your work. Also, I have seen earlier.
Okay.
Please think about these things when you take up these projects in future. Okay.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
And you are still a very good speaker. You are still a
very good speaker. Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
And you have generated a lot of energy among the audience, and we have discussed a lot from your work. And if there is no more queries from our viewers, then we can give her a big round of applause.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Ishwar.
Thank you. Thank you, Priyanka, for joining us. We'll meet again next month with some other talk.
Yes, sir.
Till then, have a nice time. Very good weekends.
Thank you, sir. Same to you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, see you.
See you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Shall I leave the meeting?
Yeah, you can.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Priyanka.